Okay, I want you to picture something with me. But I don't want you to picture a movie set, and I don't want you to picture some, war room from a Tom Clancy novel, even though what I'm about to describe sounds exactly like
It
that.
really does. It's almost uncannily cinematic.
Totally. I want you to picture a room. It's in Florida. It is January 3rd, 2026. And it's 2 o'clock in the morning,
The dead of night.
completely dark, heavily curtained. The only light in this room is coming from a bank of LED monitors. And sitting there, absolutely glued to these screens, is Donald Trump.
Right.
Now, he's not campaigning, he's not watching cable news reruns, he's not tweeting. He is watching a live feed from a helmet camera thousands of miles away.
And later he would actually tell Fox News that it was just like watching television, which, when you really stop and think about it, is a fascinating, almost dissociative way to describe what was actually happening.
It is.
Because on those screens, he wasn't watching a show. He was watching the systematic dismantling of a sovereign government in real time.
That is the hook, right? That is what we are digging into today. Because this isn't just a military operation. It feels like I don't know, a geopolitical earthquake. We are talking about the United States military entering the capital of Venezuela, Caracas, and effectively kidnapping President Nicolás Maduro right out of his bedroom.
Operation Absolute Resolve.
Exactly. Operation Absolute Resolve.
And, kidnapping is a very strong word, but legally speaking, under international frameworks, that is exactly what the rest of the world is calling it.
But the U.S. isn't.
No, the U.S., on the other hand, is calling it an arrest. And that distinction between an act of war and an act of law enforcement is going to be absolutely central to everything we discuss today. It's the hinge upon which this entire event turns.
It honestly feels like the biggest news story of the decade, maybe the century so far. And looking at this massive stack of documents you've brought to the table, I mean, we've got intelligence reports, legal analyses, technical breakdowns of the oil industry. It seems like how they did it is just wild, but the why they did it is...
Oh, it's murky. Murky is an understatement. The how is a technical marvel. It's Hollywood stuff, truly. But the why? It takes us deep into the plumbing of the global economy. It takes us into drug trade logistics, the chemical compositions of crude oil, and the very specific, very thorny history of U.S.-Venezuela relations.
So our mission for this deep dive is to pull back that curtain. We need to understand the mechanics of the raid, sure, because they are insane, and I have a million questions about how you pull that off.
Of course.
But we really need to understand what this means for the world. If a superpower can just snatch a president, do borders even matter anymore?
That is the ultimate question. It truly is. Are we seeing a one-off event, a freak occurrence born of a very specific set of circumstances? Or is this the new rules of engagement for the 21st century?
Let's start with the action. Let's start with the how. Take us to 2:00 a.m. in Caracas. What is happening on the ground?
Well, to understand the ground, you actually have to look at the air first. You have U.S. helicopters, specifically modified stealth variants, likely evolved from the Blackhawks used in the bin Laden raid, approaching the Venezuelan coast.
Oh, okay. Stealth helicopters. I'm picturing something out of a sci-fi movie.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
But the key isn't just that they're hard to see on radar, it's where they're flying. They aren't flying at a normal cruising altitude. They are skimming the ocean at 100 feet.
100 feet. That sounds incredibly dangerous, especially at night over the open ocean. One wrong move and you're in the drink. Why take that kind of risk?
It is unbelievably dangerous. The pilots who do this are some of the best in the world. But it's all about physics. It's about something called the radar horizon.
Okay.
Radar works by line of sight. It shoots a beam out, it bounces off an object, and then it comes back. But because the Earth is curved...
You can fly under the beam.
You can fly under the beam. Exactly. If you fly low enough, you stay below the reach of ground-based radar systems until you are practically on top of them. It's a game of geometry. They were effectively hiding behind the curve of the Earth.
So to any Venezuelan radar operator, the sky just looks empty.
Completely empty. Until it isn't. But by then, it's too late.
So they are invisible to the radar. But what about when they hit the city? Caracas is a massive metropolis. You've got streetlights, apartment buildings, people awake at night. You can't just hide a fleet of helicopters in a major city.
You can if you turn off the city. And this is where the modern warfare aspect really kicks in. This wasn't just men with guns. Before the first boot hit the first roof, the lights went out.
And this wasn't a coincidence, right? Not a storm or a grid failure.
Oh, no. This was a highly coordinated cyber attack.
Oh.
The sources indicate U.S. Cyber Command targeted the SCADA systems.
SCADA? What's that?
It stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. Think of it as the central nervous system for any big industrial process, like a power grid. These are the computer systems that manage the flow of electricity.
And just turn them off.
They effectively severed the connection. The entire capital plunged into darkness instantly.
I can't imagine the psychological impact of that. You're lying in bed, it's 2:00 a.m., maybe you hear a faint hum in the distance, and suddenly the ambient noise of the city just dies, total black.
It creates immediate chaos and confusion. Civilian communication networks go down. Your cell phone stops working because the towers lose power. The local police and military are scrambling just to figure out if it's a blackout, which, to be fair, is pretty common in Venezuela, or if it's an attack.
And that confusion is the window.
That's the window. By the time they realize it's an attack, the Delta Force operators are already fast-roping down from the helicopters. The darkness is a weapon. It provides cover and sows chaos.
But the source material mentions it wasn't just cyber. There were actual explosions before the landing, weren't there?
Yes, that's a crucial point. You can blind the radar with low flying,
Mhm.
and you can kill the lights with code, but you still have to deal with physical air defenses. Missile batteries, anti-aircraft guns that might have backup generators or, manual overrides,
So they had to be taken out the old-fashioned way.
the old-fashioned way.
Mm.
The sources indicate there were kinetic strikes, airstrikes on key defense nodes around Caracas to clear a safe corridor for the helicopters.
And we have to be clear about this part. This means people died.
Yes. The estimate we have is around 40 casualties just in those preliminary strikes. Venezuelan soldiers.
So this wasn't a bloodless heist or a clean extraction at all. This was a combat operation from the very beginning.
Absolutely. Heavy ordnance was used. They cleared a path with fire before anyone even touched down.
Okay, so the path is cleared. The lights are out. The helicopters are hovering over the presidential residence. The clock hits 2:01 a.m. What happens next?
The assault team goes in, and they didn't knock. The breach team used explosive charges to blow the entry points.
Which was?
The front door. No, and this is interesting. They didn't go for the front door, and they didn't land in the yard. They went for the windows, specifically the bedroom window.
Wait, they blew the bedroom window. Maduro is in there sleeping, right? That's incredibly risky if your primary objective is to take him alive.
It is, but it's a calculated risk. It's about shock and awe on a micro scale. He and his wife, Celia Flores, are asleep. Imagine the disorientation. You are ripped from sleep by an explosion, glass shattering, and then flashbang grenades going off inside your own bedroom.
Your senses would be completely overwhelmed.
Exactly. It is designed to overwhelm your senses, to freeze the brain's ability to process what is happening. You don't know who is attacking, how many there are, or where they're coming from.
But Maduro didn't just freeze up. The report says he ran.
He did. He knew the drill. Most high-value targets in volatile regions have a plan, a protocol. The residence has a panic room. It's described as a steel-reinforced bunker designed to effectively withstand a siege for hours, if not days.
So if he gets inside that room and locks that door?
The operation fails. It's over. The Americans would have to spend hours cutting through, by which time the Venezuelan army would surround the building and it becomes a bloody hostage situation or a massive shootout.
So it was a race. A literal foot race in a dark palace.
A literal foot race. The source says he made it to the door of the safe room. He was there. But the Delta Force operators are elite athletes as much as they are soldiers. They are trained for exactly this kind of explosive, short-distance pursuit.
And they caught him.
They closed the distance. The source says they intercepted him physically, just before he could engage the locking mechanism on the door.
How long did this whole part take, from the boom at the window to the moment they had him?
The timeline is what's truly staggering. From the moment of the breach, the explosion at the window, to the moment the president of Venezuela was in flex cuffs. Roughly 5 minutes.
5 minutes takes me longer to make coffee in the morning. That's unbelievable.
In 5 minutes, they dismantled a government that had been in power for decades. It just shows the incredible speed and efficiency of modern special operations.
So they have him. What now? They just leave.
Immediately. They don't linger. It's called actions on the objective. You secure the primary target.
Yeah.
You grab any immediate high-value intelligence phones, laptops, any documents on the nightstand, and you move to the extraction point on the roof.
And back to the helicopter.
Back to the helicopters. They loaded him on board, flew him out to the ESS Iwo Jima, which was an amphibious assault ship waiting just off the coast in international waters.
A floating base.
A floating, sovereign piece of American territory. From there, he was transported to Guantanamo Bay for initial processing, and then finally to Stewart Air National Guard Base in New York.
And that's where we got that photo, the one that absolutely broke the internet. Maduro in an orange jumpsuit, in chains, standing on American soil.
That image was the point. We have to understand that operations like this are 50% military and 50% psychological warfare. Showing a world leader in chains on your soil sends a message that no amount of diplomatic sanctions or strongly worded letters ever could.
It says, we can touch you.
It says, there is nowhere you are safe. Your palace is not a fortress. It's just another building we can enter at will.
But here's the thing that really nags at me. You don't just pull this off on a whim. The coordination required, the cyber, the air, the ground, the intelligence, this must have taken forever to plan. You don't wake up on Tuesday and decide to kidnap a president on Wednesday.
No, absolutely not. This is the long game. The documents show that serious planning started way back in August of 2025. This operation was running in the background for months while the world was looking elsewhere.
5 months of planning for 5 minutes of action.
At least, and the CIA was already on the ground.
Right, and this is a detail that really highlights the risk involved.
Yeah.
The CIA deployed a secret team into Venezuela months prior. But because our relations were so bad at that point, we had no embassy, no consulate, these agents likely didn't have what's called official cover. Explain that to me. What is official cover versus whatever they had?
Okay, so usually spies operate out of an embassy. They are listed on the diplomatic roster as cultural attachés or trade representatives. If they get caught doing something they shouldn't, they have diplomatic immunity. The worst that happens is they get declared persona non grata and are quietly put on a plane home.
A slap on the wrist.
A diplomatic slap on the wrist. But if you are operating without official cover, what they call NOC or non-official cover, you are just a civilian in the eyes of the most country. If you get caught spying, you can be imprisoned, tortured, or even executed. There's no diplomatic protection.
So these agents were risking execution to track Maduro.
High risk, high reward.
Whatever.
And they were tracking everything. The sources say they built what's called a pattern of life analysis. They knew what he ate, what time he walked his dog, what medication he took. They supposedly knew the layout of the furniture in his bedroom.
That's incredibly creepy, but I guess absolutely necessary for this kind of operation. But you can't get all of that from a satellite, can you? You can't see what someone is eating for breakfast from space.
No, that's the limit of technical intelligence. You can see a car move from a satellite, but you can't see who is inside or what they're saying. For that, you need human intelligence. The U.S. had a mole.
An insider.
Someone very high up in the Venezuelan government or security apparatus was feeding real-time location data to the Americans. That person is the ace in the hole for this entire mission. You can have all the stealth helicopters in the world, but if your target isn't where you think he is, you fail.
Do we know why? Why would someone turn on their own president for a foreign power? What's the motivation?
The source doesn't name the mole, obviously. That would be an instant death sentence. But in the world of counterintelligence, we often use the acronym MICE to explain why people turn. MICE.
YCE.
Money, ideology, coercion, or ego. Maybe they were paid millions of dollars. Maybe they hated Maduro's policies and truly believed they were a patriot saving the country. Maybe the CIA had leveraged some kind of blackmail or dirt on them. Or maybe they just had a massive ego and wanted to feel important. Whatever the reason, it worked.
And all this intelligence fed into the actual rehearsal. There's another detail in the planning section that just blew my mind. Kentucky.
The replica, yes.
They built a fake Venezuelan palace in the middle of Kentucky.
It's become standard procedure for these Tier 1 special operations. They did the exact same thing for the bin Laden raid in Abbottabad. They built a full-scale, one-to-one mock-up of the target residence in a remote training area.
So the soldiers could walk through it.
Not just walk through it. This allows the operators to build muscle memory. They don't just look at a blueprint on a screen. They physically run the hallways. They practice breaching the actual doors. They count the steps. 12 steps to the door, turn left, 6 steps to the safe room. Over and over and over.
So when they hit the real hallway, in the dark, with smoke and noise and adrenaline pumping, their bodies already know what to do.
Exactly. It removes the cognitive load. You aren't thinking, where do I go next? You are just executing a program you've run 100 times. The source material even says they replicated small details, like knowing exactly which floorboard creaks or exactly how a specific door swings open.
That explains the 5 minutes. It's not improvisation, it's a choreographed dance.
A very violent, very precise dance.
But even with all that preparation, they almost missed their window because of the weather, right?
Nature's the one thing you can't control no matter how much you plan. The documents say that Trump signed the official execute order on Christmas Day, December 25th.
Why Christmas? Seems symbolic.
It's psychologically tactical. Guards are often on leave, people are celebrating with their families. Institutional alertness is at its lowest. It's a classic surprise attack timing. History is full of attacks launched on major holidays.
But it didn't happen on Christmas.
No. A massive storm front moved in over the Caribbean. Bad weather. High winds, low visibility. Too dangerous to fly the helicopters, especially at that low altitude. They had to sit on their hands for over a week, just waiting for a break in the clouds. The actual operation was delayed until the night of January 2nd, going into the 3rd.
That must have been an incredibly tense week in the White House.
Exceedingly.
Whew.
Every single day you wait is another day the secret could leak. Every day is another chance for the mole to be discovered and for the entire operation to be compromised.
Okay, so that's the how, and it's impressive, I have to admit. It is a masterclass in military planning and execution. But now we have to get into the why, because this is where the story gets really complicated.
Yes, it does.
The official story from the White House, from the State Department, is drugs. They say Maduro is a narco-terrorist.
Right. The Department of Justice unsealed these indictments that had been prepared, charging him and his wife and other top officials with essentially turning Venezuela into a massive state-sponsored drug cartel. The official narrative is that he's been flooding the U.S. with cocaine since 1999.
Flooding the U.S., that's the phrase I keep seeing in all the press releases. But you've got some data here on drug routes that makes me scratch my head a bit. Does the data actually back that up?
Not really.
Yeah.
And this is where we have to be very analytical and, look past the headlines and the sound bites. If you look at the DEA's own maps, their own internal data on drug trafficking flows, the vast, vast majority of cocaine entering the United States comes up the Pacific route.
The Pacific, but Venezuela is on the Caribbean coast, the Atlantic side.
Exactly.
Mm.
Venezuela has no Pacific coastline. The cocaine is grown and produced in the Andes, primarily Colombia, Peru, Bolivia. From there, it moves west to the Pacific coast. It gets put on speedboats or even these crude homemade submersibles and moves up the Pacific past Central America with major transit points in places like Guatemala and Mexico, and then into California or Arizona.
So geographically, Venezuela isn't on the main highway for cocaine into the U.S.
It's a side road at best. Some drugs do move through Venezuela to Europe or to the Caribbean and then up, but it's not the primary vector into the United States. And the numbers in the report bear this out. The indictment alleges Venezuela moves maybe 200 to 250 metric tons a year.
Which sounds like a lot.
It is a lot in absolute terms,
Hmm.
but compare it to a place like Guatemala. In 2018, the State Department estimated Guatemala was a transit point for 1,400 metric tons.
Wow. So Guatemala is moving something like 6 or 7 times more cocaine than Venezuela.
Roughly, yes. So if your stated goal is purely to stop the cocaine, launching a full-scale military operation against Venezuela is a highly inefficient way to do it. You'd be making a much bigger dent in the supply chain by focusing on the Pacific corridor.
And then there's the other issue, which is what is actually killing Americans. I keep reading about the opioid crisis, the fentanyl crisis. Is cocaine the big killer right now?
No. By a huge margin, it is not. The leading cause of overdose deaths in the U.S. for years now has been synthetic opioids, primarily fentanyl. And fentanyl has almost nothing to do with Venezuela.
Where does that come from?
The fentanyl precursors, the base chemicals, largely come from China. They're shipped to Mexico, where they are synthesized into the final product by the cartels there and then brought across the U.S. southern border. Venezuela is simply not a player in the fentanyl trade.
So let me see if I have this straight. We launched the most audacious military raid in modern history to stop a drug, cocaine, that isn't the main killer, coming from a country that isn't the main supplier, via a route that isn't the main route.
When you lay it out like that, yes, that is the conclusion the data leads us to. It strongly suggests that while the drug charges might be technically true on some level, I mean, there was certainly corruption and drug trafficking in Venezuela, they were likely a pretext, a convenient legal wrapper for a different primary objective.
Which brings us to that comparison that keeps getting made, the weapons of mass destruction argument.
Maduro made that comparison himself in the days before the raid. He went on television and said the U.S. was manufacturing a crisis to justify an invasion, just like they did in Iraq in 2003. And historically, he has a point. Great powers often need a moral casus belli, a just reason for war, to sell an operation to their public and to the world.
And stopping a narco-dictator sounds a lot better than the alternative.
Stopping drugs sells better to the American public than securing strategic resources.
Resources. Okay, let's talk about the dinosaur in the room. Or, I guess, in the ground. Oil.
The black gold. You cannot talk about Venezuela, ever, without talking about geology.
I looked up the reserves before we started, and I knew they had oil, but I genuinely did not realize how much.
It is the largest proven crude oil reserve on the planet.
Hmm.
The official number is 303 billion barrels. That is more than Saudi Arabia. It is more than Iran, more than Russia. It is more than the United States.
But hang on, that's the part that always confused me. I hear all the time that the U.S. is the biggest oil producer in the world now because of all the fracking in Texas and North Dakota. If we're producing so much, why do we need their oil?
This is the aha moment in this whole story. This is the crucial detail. It's not just about oil as a generic substance. It's about the type of oil. Crude oil isn't all the same.
Okay.
U.S. shale oil,
Hmm.
the stuff we get from fracking, is what the industry calls light and sweet. It's very thin, almost like water, and has a low sulfur content. It's fantastic for making gasoline.
Okay. Light and sweet. And what does Venezuela have?
Venezuela has the opposite. They have heavy, sour crude. It's incredibly thick, almost like sludge or molasses, and it is full of sulfur and heavy metals. It is nasty, difficult stuff to work with.
That sounds worse. Why would we want the sludge if we have the, I don't know, the champagne of oil right here at home?
Because of our refineries. This is the key. Back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, before the U.S. shale boom, American companies spent billions and billions of dollars building these massive, complex refineries all along the Gulf Coast in places like Houston and Louisiana. And they were specifically engineered to process heavy, sour sludge.
Why?
Because that's what was available and cheap at the time from places like Venezuela and Mexico. They have these huge, expensive units called cokers that are designed to crack open heavy molecules and get the valuable stuff out.
So we built a machine that's designed to eat sludge, and now we're trying to feed it light oil?
That is a perfect analogy. You're running the wrong type of fuel through your engine. Running light, sweet crude through a heavy, sour refinery is inefficient. It's like putting premium racing fuel in an old diesel tractor. You can do it, but it's a waste of money, and the machinery isn't optimized for it. To run at peak profit, these American refineries need a steady diet of heavy crude.
And Venezuela is the closest, biggest source of it.
It's right here in our backyard. So there is this technological and economic dependency that most people just don't see. We need their mud to make our machines work properly.
And that dependency was broken when Hugo Chavez and later Maduro nationalized the industry.
Correct. And that's where the history becomes so important. We used to be best friends with Venezuela, right?
Right. I read that JFK once called Venezuela our best friend in Latin America.
Absolutely. The relationship was fantastic for decades. But in the early 2000s, Hugo Chavez came to power and passed the Organic Hydrocarbons Law of 2001. It basically said, this oil in our ground belongs to the people of Venezuela. Foreign companies can't own a majority stake in our oil fields anymore. They have to become junior partners to our state oil company, PDVSA.
And the big American companies, Exxon, ConocoPhillips, they did not like that.
They hated it. They had invested billions building up the infrastructure, and suddenly they lost access to billions in future profits. They were effectively kicked out or forced to accept deals they considered terrible. And ever since that moment, U.S. policy toward Venezuela has been consistently hostile.
And Trump was very, very blunt about this after the raid. I have the quote right here. He said, quote, "They took oil away from us."
And he also called it the greatest theft in the history of America. That is a very revealing choice of words. It implies that the oil under Venezuelan ground somehow belonged to the U.S., or at least the right to extract it belonged to American companies.
It's a very specific mindset, isn't it? We found it, we built the pumps, so it's ours, even if it's in your country.
It is the absolute definition of resource nationalism clashing with corporate imperialism. The Trump administration clearly views the nationalization as a theft of American intellectual and physical capital. So in their view, Operation Absolute Resolve isn't an invasion, it's a repossession.
A repo job with Black Hawk helicopters. And now the plan is to send American companies back in.
That's what was announced. The reconstruction plan involves the U.S. majors, Exxon, Chevron, and others returning to Venezuela to rebuild the crumbling infrastructure and start pumping that heavy crude back up to the refineries in Houston.
It all fits together perfectly. The refineries get their specific type of crude, the oil companies get their profits back, and the U.S. government controls the tap to the largest oil reserve in the world.
It makes a lot more strategic sense as a motive than the drug theory does. It aligns perfectly with the economic incentives.
Is it legal? I mean, can you just go into another country and take their president because you want their oil and you happen to have a drug warrant from a court in New York?
That is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? And the short answer under all existing international law is no, absolutely not.
Walk us through the legal framework here. Why not?
The entire foundation of international relations since the end of World War II is the United Nations Charter. Specifically, you look at Article 2, Section 4. It explicitly prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state.
And kidnapping the head of state seems like a pretty clear violation of their political independence.
It's the ultimate violation. It is a textbook act of war. Normally, if you want to arrest a foreign leader for crimes, you have to go through international legal bodies, like the International Criminal Court in The Hague. You don't send Delta Force.
But the U.S. administration argues this wasn't war. They keep using that phrase, law enforcement.
This is the legal loophole they're trying to thread. By indicting him in a U.S. domestic court first, they are attempting to frame the military operation as simply serving a subpoena. They are saying, we didn't invade Venezuela. We didn't occupy the country. We just entered a specific building to arrest a specific fugitive from U.S. justice who happened to be the president.
That sounds like a terrifying precedent to set. I'm not invading your house. I'm just coming into your living room to arrest your dad.
And I'm bringing a tank to do it. It completely blurs the line between what we think of as police work and what we think of as warfare.
Exactly. And they didn't even go to Congress for this, did they?
No. The U.S. Constitution is clear that only Congress can declare war. And then you have the War Powers Resolution, which is supposed to limit the president's ability to use military force abroad without approval. But by calling it a police action or a counter-narcotics operation, the administration argued it didn't rise to the level of war, and therefore they bypassed Congress entirely.
So they just redefined the very meaning of the word war to suit their needs.
They did. And the rest of the world is watching this and, as you can imagine, freaking out.
Who's been the most vocal?
Well, you're seeing condemnations from traditional U.S. allies like Norway and Spain and neighbors like Mexico. And then, of course, rivals like China and Russia are using this as a massive propaganda victory. They're saying, see, we told you the Americans don't care about international law. They are hypocrites who only follow the rules when it suits them.
The term New Age colonialism keeps popping up in the source material I was reading.
It fits, doesn't it? If might makes right, then the concept of sovereignty is just a polite fiction. It means if you are a weaker nation and you have something a stronger nation wants, the strong can just take it. It completely dismantles the legal protections that smaller nations rely on to exist.
And it's not stopping with Venezuela. The sources say Trump is already making threats to other neighbors.
He's issued warnings to Colombia and Mexico to fall in line on various trade and drug policies. And, bizarrely, remember Greenland.
Oh, right. From his first term when he wanted to buy Greenland from Denmark.
He's brought it up again. But now the context is completely different. Before, everyone sort of laughed it off as a joke, a weird real estate fantasy. Now, after Venezuela, when the President of the United States says, we'd like to buy your strategically important island, it sounds less like an offer and more like a threat.
That's a nice island you have there. It would be a shame if Delta Force had to come and visit it.
Precisely. It fundamentally changes the diplomatic calculus for every country in the world. It introduces an element of raw physical coercion into what are supposed to be peaceful negotiations.
And what can the UN do about any of this?
Effectively nothing. The United States holds veto power on the UN Security Council. They can block any resolution that tries to condemn them or sanction them. There is no international cop big enough to arrest the U.S.
So we are really moving into a world with no guardrails.
A world of raw power, a return to the 19th century perhaps, but with 21st century technology.
Before we wrap up, there is one more theory that's mentioned in the files. It's a bit of a tinfoil hat theory on the surface, but the source mentions it seriously.
Yeah.
The distraction factor.
The Epstein files.
Yeah, the timing of this whole thing is very convenient.
Very convenient. In the week just before this operation launched, a new tranche of documents were unsealed regarding the Jeffrey Epstein case. And there were new, credible allegations that linked several high-profile figures, including Trump, to very serious crimes. The media was buzzing with it.
So the theory is basically wag the dog. You start a war, or in this case, a spectacular military operation, to bury a domestic scandal.
It's a classic political strategy. A massive, sensational military victory completely dominates the news cycle. It sucks all the oxygen out of the room. Nobody is talking about court documents when you have live footage of the president of Venezuela being marched off a plane in chains in New York.
Whether it was the main reason or just a convenient bonus, it certainly worked. The Epstein story just vanished overnight.
It did. The spectacle completely erased the scandal from the front pages.
So let's try and pull all of this together. We started in a dark room in Florida. We ended with a potentially shattered international order. We have a raid that was executed with surgical, almost unbelievable precision, the tech, the cyber, the special ops.
A military masterpiece in a vacuum.
Right. Then we have an official justification about drugs that seems to fall apart as soon as you look at a map. And behind that, we have a shadow justification about oil that fits the economic, historical, and technological reality absolutely perfectly.
And layered on top of all of it, we have a new and dangerous precedent. If you have resources the United States needs or wants, your sovereignty is now conditional.
That's a chilling thought to leave our listeners with. I think, most of us grew up with this idea that borders were real, that they were solid lines. Maybe they were just suggestions all along.
Operation Absolute Resolve suggests they are very faint lines indeed, if you can even see them at all.
This has been a heavy one, but a really important one to unpack. We've gone through the tech, the money, and the law. And I think the big takeaway is that next time you see a headline about a surgical strike or a law enforcement action, you should probably ask a few more questions about what's really going on under the hood.
Always look at the map and always follow the money.
Words to live by. Thanks for diving deep with us on this one.
My pleasure.
And to you listening, stay curious. We'll see you in the next